Hello, I'm Hugh Stewart. This is News for Scotland on the Scotland Channel. Despite the UK government being urged to put fairness first and increase taxes on the rich, a move that would be backed by two-thirds of Scots, Chancellor Rachel Reeves has, as expected, made billions of pounds worth of cuts in her spring budget statement to Westminster on Wednesday. Cuts to benefits for the disabled and a rise in defence spending, which will turn the UK into a defence industrial superpower in an increasingly uncertain world, were among the key takeaways from UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves' spring budget statement. Support given to people with disabilities and long-term health conditions will be slashed by 50% and then frozen for new claimants from 29/30, and the move expected to save £3.4 billion, while spending on defence will rise to 2.5% of GDP from April 27, with the aim of increasing it to 3% by the next parliamentary term. The Chancellor claimed that increased defence spending would make the UK a defence industrial superpower, creating new jobs, but then went on to list large investments in English towns with existing military infrastructure, including Barrow and Furness, Portsmouth, Plymouth and Aldershot, investment driven with the formation of a new Defence Growth Board. Reeves also announced the building of a third runway for Heathrow Airport and a relaxation of planning rules in England to speed up house building there. The Chancellor ignored calls to protect people in poverty by increasing the amount that the rich have to pay in taxes. While the UK government last week announced plans to slash benefits for some of the most vulnerable in society, including the disabled, to plug an economic black hole and to increase spending on the military, it was revealed last September that Amazon paid tax for the first time in 4 years, just £18.7 million on £27 billion worth of sales in the UK. High UK government borrowing and low economic growth in England have already wiped out the government's expected £9.9 billion surplus. Scotland's economy is expected to grow, with forecasts suggesting a stronger performance in 24 and 25 compared with 23. But Scotland's growth as part of the UK is still relatively subdued. Jamie Livingston, head of Oxfam Scotland, said it's indefensible that public spending to support those in poverty and crisis is being slashed while private wealth is being stashed away. Mark Campbell of the campaign group Patriotic Millionaires said, "As a millionaire, I know the economy is working for a few people like me and working against the vast majority." He added, "Spending cuts are short-sighted and will only increase the worries of millions of people in the UK struggling to put food on the table and heat their homes. Meanwhile, the very richest people in our society are watching their wealth grow exponentially. It seems outrageous that the wealth of the richest is taxed at a much lower rate than the income of working people who bear the brunt of these budget cuts." He says a wealth tax is a very clear alternative. Do you know anyone of pension age who needs help in looking after themselves? Well, the pension age disability payment is replacing the attendance allowance from the Department of Work and Pensions in Scotland. Social Security Scotland has started transferring the awards of 169,000 people in Scotland who currently receive attendance allowance over to the new benefits. People currently getting attendance allowance do not need to take any action. The transfer will happen automatically in phases throughout this year. Everyone will continue to receive their payments on time and in the right amount. The pension age disability payment has now been extended to Aberdeenshire, Angus, Clackmannanshire, the City of Dundee, Falkirk, Fife, Moray, the Western Isles, Perth and Kinross and Stirling. It's now also available in all three Ayrshire local authority areas, that's East, North and South Ayrshire. The payment first launched in 5 local authority areas in October 21st last year and will be available throughout Scotland from April the 22nd. Pension age disability payment is for disabled people or those with a long-term health condition that means they need help in looking after themselves or supervision to stay safe. It's available to people of state pension age and also available to pensioners who are terminally ill. It's not means tested and is worth between £290 and £434 a month, depending on the needs of the person who gets it, and those amounts will be inflation increased from the start of April. Our Social Justice Secretary Shirley Ann Somerville said, "I urge anyone who thinks they could be eligible for pension age disability payments to apply." She said it's vital that older people who are disabled, terminally ill people, or those who have care needs to get the money they need to help them look after themselves, stay safe and live with dignity. She said the Scottish Government is committed to ensuring everyone gets the financial support they're entitled to, and this has not changed following the UK Government's announcement on welfare cuts. And now let's look at Scotland's new Space Centre in Saxiford. The Shetland Saxiford Spaceport is at the centre of concerns that it may be hijacked by the UK's military to help weaponise space. Top officials from the UK Space Agency are believed to have held over 130 meetings with the Ministry of Defence in 2024, prompting renewed concerns about the weaponisation of space. The meetings discussed a spaceport which is being built in Unst in connection with using nuclear reactors in space and in collaboration with the US, NATO and arms companies. Two members of the UK Space Agency's advisory board also work for the MOD, the UK's Ministry of Defence. The subject of one meeting was kept secret because it was about a project that was apparently highly confidential and not in the public domain. Even the project's title risked apparently compromising our nation's security, said the Space Agency. These meetings were revealed in response to a Freedom of Information request and have been criticised by campaigners. Although Scotland's bid to build spaceports is marketed as scientific research, it's being driven by the defence industry, campaigners say. Campaigners from Space Watch UK warn that space could become a new frontier of conflict, which they say would put humanity at risk. They fear that Scotland's spaceport could be a Trojan horse for the arms industry and are demanding transparency. However, the UK Space Agency and the MOD both stress the necessity to work together to, as they put it, to protect vital national infrastructure from space-based threats. Saxiford, on the northern tip of the most northernly inhabited Shetland Isle of Unst, is leading the race to open a spaceport in Scotland and is hoping to be ready for its first launch in July of this year. Once operational, Saxiford will be the only vertical launch spaceport anywhere in Europe, which will reduce costs for European companies to put satellites into space by removing the need to send them halfway around the world to launch from French Guiana. However, despite the fact that Scotland is not only leading the European space sector in satellite manufacture, eco-rocket design, and the development of Europe's only spaceports, the Scotland Channel revealed in August last year that Scotland receives minimum support from the UK Space Agency, which invests 80% of its total budget in England, in particular in the south of England, where most of the UK's strategic investments are always made. This despite the fact that Scotland and not England is not only leading the European space sector through innovation, but is far better placed for rocket launches because the north of Scotland in particular has a sparse population compared to most of England or continental Europe, making rocket launches from Scotland far safer. Our documentary, Scotland in Space, was the first film to be shown on this new channel when we launched on the 1st of August last year, and it's still available to watch on the Scotland Channel here on YouTube. Meanwhile, a spokesman for the campaign group Spacewatch UK said, although the space industry presents itself as being about science, discovery and inspiration, the reality is that much of the work in the sector is military related. Space technologies were born out of weaponry developed by the Nazis in World War II. Nowadays, these technologies are still being developed, not for the collective benefit of mankind, but largely for their military applications, said the spokesperson, who added, when space programs become indistinguishable from military agendas, we accelerate a new frontier of conflict. Space should be a realm of shared scientific endeavour, not a battleground for geopolitical dominance. The Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament argued that space should be kept for peace. They said secrecy about launches whose purpose, if declared, would compromise our national security does not sound like a civil communications satellite or a scientific experiment. We do not expect to be told the details of UK defence strategy, but the truth about what these spaceports really are for instead of the fluff about civilian use. Well, it's Tartan week again. First Minister John Swinney will undertake a series of engagements in New York as part of Tartan Week, the annual celebration of Scottish heritage and culture in the United States. In recognition of the important role of the US as a key investment and trading partner, the First Minister will meet a number of high-profile current and potential investors to promote the economic opportunities on offer here in Scotland. Speaking ahead of his visit, the First Minister said, Scotland enjoys deep and enduring links with the US, which is both our largest inward investor and our second largest export market after the European Union. He said in 2023, exports of Scottish goods to the US were worth £4 billion. And here in Scotland, more than 700 US-owned enterprises provide employment to more than 115,000 people. Scotland, he says, is open for business and is one of the best places in the world to invest. We have a reputation as a world-class entrepreneurial nation with a number of startups, spin-outs and large-scale companies growing at pace. We also have the potential to become a strategic hub for future renewable energy investments, specifically developing and scaling projects in offshore wind, green hydrogen and energy storage. He said Tartan Week in April is a fantastic opportunity to celebrate Scottish culture and promote economic opportunities on both sides of the Atlantic. And Mr Swinney said, I'm looking forward to attending this week's Tartan Week events, meeting our dynamic diaspora and engaging with some of our biggest current and potential investors. He said, I want to showcase Scotland's progressive international outlook and our focus on innovation, sustainability and growth. And now good news about Scotland's universities. Access to education at university for Scottish students from the most deprived areas has increased to a near record high, official figures have shown. The latest Higher Education Statistics Agency figures for 23-24 show that 16.7% of full-time degree entrants to Scottish universities came from the nation's 20% most deprived areas, and that marks an increase from 16.3% the previous year. These figures also show an increase overall in the number of Scottish-based students at Scottish universities to just under 174,000, as well as a rise in full-time Scottish first-degree entrants. However, non-EU international student numbers have seen a decline in 23-24 following changes by the UK government to the immigration system, such as ending the inclusion of family members on student visas. Our Minister for Higher and Further Education, Graham Day, said these figures show the significant progress of Scotland's universities in making higher education not only more inclusive, but also attracting a rising number of Scots overall. He went on, the number of Scots from the most deprived backgrounds entering university on full-time first-degree courses is now 37% up since the establishment of the Commission on Widening Access by the SNP government. He says this means many more people, no matter the background, have the opportunity to prosper in their lives. Mr Day said, we recognise the issues raised by the sector around the decline in international student numbers and damaging UK immigration policies, which is why we've proposed a Scottish graduate visa, which would allow us to retain international students after they graduate from Scotland's institutions. The UK COVID inquiry in London this week heard that Scotland did not set up a VIP fast lane because we didn't need one. That's according to Jean Freeman, who was Scotland's health minister during the pandemic. Scotland did not use a system like the controversial fast lane south of the border, which gave priority to companies with personal links to people in the UK Conservative government. Some companies were given contracts by the Conservatives, although they had no expertise in making specialist medical clothing. Freeman testified that Scotland never ran out of PPE, although we came close a couple of times. This is in spite of Matt Hancock, England's Health Secretary, telling companies based south of the border to prioritise NHS England, even if they had contracted to supply the Scottish Health Service. Jean Freeman told the inquiry in London that Scotland had an effective system in place set up in 1974, the NSS, which brought together both suppliers and Scottish health managers, making sure that high-quality equipment was supplied from trusted companies. This system made sure that the needed equipment was supplied without any hint of bias or preferential treatment, unlike the system in England. She told the inquiry that she had doubts about the probity and due diligence of the fast lane system which Hancock set up for England, in terms of who received the contracts and whether the equipment provided was of high enough quality. Scotland, she said, had over the years built up a domestic supply chain from trusted suppliers who could be relied upon to supply the Scottish Health Service, even if they had tempting offers from bigger countries. About 80% of Scotland's PPE came from these domestic suppliers, and this is fortunate because the inquiry also heard that the Foreign Office in London instructed British embassies to withdraw support from the Scottish Government when negotiating PPE contracts abroad. The Scottish Government was able to get round this ban using our international contracts in Scottish Development International, which is the Scottish Government body tasked with bringing investment into the country. The COVID inquiry continues. Although free independence banners are being offered to supporters to display in people's gardens, on the sides of houses or in fields by the independence group Believe in Scotland. BIS has been providing banners for local Yes groups, which it says have been a great success. And now BIS want to boost this activity with new banner designs for use by people who have gardens or land in a prominent location, which can be ordered via Yes groups through a partnership with a relatively new group called Midas Scotland, who ran a crowdfunder to carry out some indie campaigning. Midas Scotland have allocated a budget of £2,500, which includes generous funding from SIF, the Scottish Independence Foundation, and have also asked BIS and Indie Poster Boy to provide some designs for banners and for BIS to promote the banners to affiliated local Yes groups. These are expected to be used as mini billboard-style banners and not as backgrounds for stalls or events, as Believe in Scotland already have a range of BIS banners for that purpose. Strong images and clear, short, punchy text are vital for such canvas banners to work, as passers-by, usually in public transport or in a car, only have a few seconds to assimilate the information, said a spokesperson for BIS. He says it's a very cost-effective way to get key messages out. The PVC banners will be produced by Edinburgh Banners, who give Yes groups a discount and sent directly to the Yes group ordering the banner. The standard size being envisaged is 2.5 metres by 1.25 metres, but the banners can be made marginally smaller or preferably larger to suit individual locations. Believe in Scotland are keen for the banners to be in really good positions and would like any group who wants one of the banners to contact Believe in Scotland before the 5th of April. If applicants can send a postcode for where the banner will be displayed, BIS can also commit to area-specific social media advertising so that people who see the banners in a particular location will then be reminded of the message the next time they go on social media. Significant delays are expected to continue in Glasgow's Kirkcaldy Road for some time following the discovery of a sinkhole by water workers last Sunday, that's the 23rd of March. Kirkcaldy Road, which was already reduced to one lane each way, has now been shut to all westbound traffic from Port Dundas Street, West Nile Street junction. A Scottish Water spokesperson said, "The void is underneath the already coned off side of the carriageway, but we have to shut a third lane as well to carry out the repair safely. At this moment, we do not know how long each of these emergency works and associated roadworks will be in place. However, we will work as quickly as safety allows to complete the works at the earliest opportunity." And now let's look ahead to the Scottish Parliament elections next year, next May. Well, none of Scotland's pro-independence parties have indicated that their election manifestos for next year's election will include any commitment to immediate action on independence. This is despite a poll in a national newspaper last week which suggests that pro-independence parties will achieve 66 seats in the Scottish Parliament, which would mean a majority. But according to Peter Bell of the New Scotland Party, if the nation's poll seat projections is accurate, it will be a recipe for another 5 years of paralysis and decay for Scotland's cause, because he said all of the pro-independence parties are pro-independence in name only. He said they talk about independence for electioneering purposes, but at best they have restoration of Scotland's rightful constitutional status as a vague long-term aspiration. Mr. Bell added that pro-independence voters are too focused on who they are voting for and not on what they are voting for. Incredibly, he says, there are still people out there who are utterly convinced that the only thing they need to do to get independence is to vote SNP. It's as if the last decade simply didn't happen. The Scottish Government's Cabinet Secretary for the Constitution, Angus Robertson, has also come under fire from Respect Scottish Sovereignty for kicking a bid to have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, that's the ICCPR, implemented into Scots law. Respect Scottish Sovereignty has been pressing the Scottish Government to do this and argues that because the UK already ratified this into English law in 1976, there's no obstacle to the Scottish Government doing so, and unlike the UK, acting on it. This International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR, guarantees various political rights, including self-determination, which would prevent the British state in England from constantly blocking any hope of a new referendum in Scotland. Henry Ferguson of Respect Scottish Sovereignty wrote to Angus Robertson this January calling on the United Nations Covenant to be included in Scots law, but so far he's received no response other than a case-holding number. He says a reply now looks increasingly unlikely. The UK Government argues that incorporating ICCPR would extend the powers of the Scottish Parliament beyond devolved matters, although Westminster uses the Internal Market Act to undermine Scottish Parliament in devolved matters. Respect Scottish Sovereignty accuses the UK Government of acting in bad faith. They say it ratified the international treaty in 1976 and has done nothing since to incorporate the treaty into domestic law. Despite repeated criticism from both the Scottish Human Rights Campaign and the United Nations Human Rights Committee, that's a UNHRC, the UK continues in its refusal to ratify the operational protocol in the ICCPR. This protocol establishes a formal complaints procedure directly to the UNHRC, which of course Westminster wants to avoid at all costs. There's no question of giving rebellious Scots a key to the prison door, said Mr Ferguson, who called on Scots to register with scotlanddecides.org in favour of independence voting and to encourage friends, family and work colleagues to do the same. Meanwhile, Peter Bell said, assuming the poll numbers are accurate, there's worse in prospect even than the 5 additional years of pusillanimous procrastination. That's all we can hope for from a notionally pro-independence majority made up of nominally pro-independence parties, packed with self-serving and constitutionally clueless cowards. In those numbers we see the ominous shadow of a potential grand alliance of British parties intended of having Scotland locked into the Union. And that rounds up our stories for this week. Join us again from 7 p.m. next Friday for independent news without the mainstream media bias. Support us by subscribing to the Scotland channel on youtube.com/the Scotland channel. I'm Hugh, thanks for watching.